So here we are. This is going to be our very final project. Now for this project, we're not going to be learning anything new, but what we are going to be doing is we're going to be taking everything that we have learned up to this point, we're going to be combining it into one final piece of artwork. So we're going to be playing with brushes, we're going to be playing with blurring things, we're going to be playing with color, we're going to be playing with layers, we're going to be putting it all together. So as I go through this, feel free to draw along, and if at any time you want to pause it and just kind of work at your own speed, that's great. I think that's one of the best ways to do this. So let's get started. What we're going to be drawing today is an illustration with a lot of leaves in it, and I decided to use a photo reference to start out with in order to do this. So let's import our photo. We're going to go up to the wrench in the upper left hand corner, and I'm going to go to Insert File. Now this is a photo I took and I saved it to iCloud. You can take a photo, I guess, if you want with your iPad or whatever you want. I saved it to iCloud because it was on my phone originally, and I'm just going to scroll on down until I find it. Now this photo, it is this leaf photo here. I'm just going to tap that and it's going to import here onto its own layer. This photo is attached to this lesson, so if you want to use this exact photo, feel free. That's what it's there for. So now that this photo is inserted, now that it is on its own layer, you can see whenever you insert something, along the very edges, there's kind of that dotted line that's moving, and that means that it is selected. Our arrow tool in the upper left-hand corner is active, and so I'm just going to pinch out a little bit, and I'm going to try to center these leaves on the screen a little bit. I want just as much room on the sides and on the top and the bottom as there is. So I'm just going to kind of pinch it out, move it over to the right a little bit, try to get it centered. Doesn't have to be perfect. I think this looks good the way it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tap the arrow in the upper left-hand corner again and deselect it. And this is going to be our photo reference for the illustration that we're going to be doing. So the next step is I'm going to go up to my layers. I'm going to go ahead and tap on that. And just to keep, we're going to have a lot of layers here. So just to keep things simple, I'm going to make sure that I rename all of these. Hit backspace first, and then I'm going to rename this leaves photo. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make it transparent so I can see what I'm drawing on top of it a little bit better. So I'm going to tap on the letter N and just change the opacity, maybe drop it down to about 25% or so. And that's good to go. I'm going to tap on N to close that. Now my next step is creating a brand new layer. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that plus button to create my new layer. And on this layer, I'm going to be drawing the first of the leaves, the leaf that is on top. So I'm going to go ahead and tap on that layer. I'm going to go to rename that layer, and I'm going to call this top leaf. There we go. So everything seems set there. So our next step is we're just going to trace this leaf on this new layer that we created. So I want to grab a color. I'm going to just go to a nice orange color. So I'm going to go to orange, and then I'm going to pull this up kind of to an intensity that I like. That looks pretty good. And now I'm going to make sure that I have a pen I like. So I'm going to go ahead and close my color, going to tap on my brushes, and I want a nice solid line. So I'm going to go to my inking brushes, and I'm going to go to, I guess the technical pen would work. That's probably my best bet. So I think I'm going to stick with the technical pen for this. I'm going to go ahead and tap off my brushes, and now all I have to do is trace this leaf. Now, you're going to see me start to trace here, and I'm going to put my line in there, and I'm actually going to shrink down my pen. It looks like I got a little dot up here, so I'm going to erase that. There we go, and I'm just going to keep drawing, and as you can see, this is far from perfect. And if you want to move fast or you want to move slow, however you want to do it, I'm moving pretty fast for the sake of this demonstration. You might want to take a little bit more time tracing your leaf, kind of get the points of this leaf on here a little better. But what's important here is just that we're tracing that leaf. So I'm going to speed ahead. I'll meet back with you in a second, but if you want to pause it and follow along with this step, you're welcome to. So there we go, I have traced my leaf. Another thing that I did, which I've done several times in previous lessons, is I made sure that this shape is completely enclosed, because I'm going to now fill this leaf with color by dragging on my color in the upper right hand corner, dragging it into my leaf, making sure it is full. If I need to, I can slide this to the right and make sure my color drop threshold is okay. That looks pretty good. I'm going to erase any extra dots that I have on there, and there we go. That is leaf number 1. Now I'm going to go over to my layers, and I'm going to create this bottom leaf by pressing the plus sign so I can create that in a separate layer. Going to tap on that layer to rename it. I'm going to go back and name this bottom leaf. There we go. And since it is going to be below my top leaf, I'm going to tap and hold on that layer, which lets me rearrange it, and I'm just going to move that layer below my top leaf. And so that I can, actually, now I'm just going to draw. So the first leaf is kind of that golden yellowish color. This bottom leaf has more of a red color. So I'm going to grab a color that is a little bit deeper, and I'm going to kind of push down on that red, get some contrast going here. One of the nice things about the color picker is that the previous color you had, which in my case was this orange, is right next to this new color that you chose. And so not only can I see the difference in color, I can see the difference in contrast of those colors. So I don't want this is technically a different color, but there's not a lot of contrast between them now that I've kind of moved it up to that lighter color. I want some contrast between these, so I'm going to move this. I'm not only going to make it a different color, I'm going to make it a darker color as well. So that looks pretty good. And now I'm just going to do the same exact thing. I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to trace my leaf, and I'll be back in a second, and I'm just going to speed through this, and you can pause it and draw along if you'd like. Cool, so now I have my leaf here. Everything's looking okay. There's one problem. Like before, when I dropped color into this shape, it was enclosed. But now if I do that, I didn't actually enclose that leaf. So when I drop the color, yuck, that's not what I wanted to happen. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to go up here and I'm going to turn off my top leaf layer for a second. I'm going to go back to my pen tool, and I'm just going to make sure that this shape is enclosed. So that way, now that all of my shape is nicely enclosed there, I can just come in here with my color, drop it on in there, and fill it in really well. And as you see, the leaf looks really funky over here, but that's okay. It's going to be covered up. I could even leave that arrow in there because I've got that layer on top of that with the other leaf already in it. One thing I did forget to do is I also want to get the stems in here. So I'm just going to take my brush, and actually that's too thin, so I'm going to make my brush a little bigger on the left-hand side, and I'm just going to come in here, and again, doesn't have to be perfect. I just want to get the stem kind of drawn in the way I need it to. I can go to my top leaf layer, and I can draw on the stem there. I need the orange color, so I tap and hold my finger on the canvas to bring up my color picker. There we go, perfect. Now I just have to come in here, and there we go. Now that stem is where I need it to be. So that is all looking good. And I think my next step is to add some shadow to these leaves. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to tap on my layer palette. And now I need to create a new layer that I'm going to put my shadows on. I'm just going to tap on leave photos and hit the plus button there so I don't have to rearrange this layer. Then I go to tap on that layer and rename it. I'm going to go backwards here. I think I'm going to name this Leaves Shadow. There we go. I type slower than I talk, so I have to slow down my words as I go. But everything's looking good on that layer. I'm going to go ahead and close those layers. I'm going to grab my color, and I'm going to grab something really dark. I'm just going to grab that black. And from here on out, I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. One of the nice things about this photo is it has the shadow already on it. I'm not going to worry about color fill. I'm just going to kind of fill in where I think the shadow needs to go. And one of the things I'm going to point out here is that in some places, my shadow is blurry. For now, I'm not too worried about it. Another thing is that it's a little hard to see my shadow, so I can always come back to my layers, go to my leaf photo, tap the letter N, and I can increase the opacity of the photo so it's a little bit easier for me to see. Then I can go back to my leaves shadow layer, go back to my brush tool, and continue doing what I'm doing. Now, obviously, our shadow is not going to be black, and it's not going to be completely solid either, but that's okay. We're just kind of getting down the rough shape of these shadows first, and then we're going to start modifying it. We're going to start tweaking it. So there we go. That's looking okay. Get a nice shadow down between those two leaves there. I need to get my shadow up in here a little bit. And like I said, this is so far from perfect, but that's okay. I think when it all comes together, it's going to look okay. It's going to look pretty good. There we go. Get that in there. Maybe I will color swatch this so I don't have to fill it all in. So there we go. Those are our shadows. They're looking horrendous. We forgot one. That's all right. Quickly fill that one in. And I'm going to get these shadows also on the stems. That's kind of an interesting thing, because where the shadow is closer to the stem is where the stem is actually hitting or touching on the surface that the photo was taken. And where the shadow gets further away from the stem, that means that the stem isn't quite as close. There we go. So that looks okay. I just kind of made up that second stem shadow there. Delete that. So there we go. Our shadows are in place, so let's start messing with them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my layers, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off my leaf photo. That's just going to make it easier to see things. The next thing I'm going to do is on my leaves shadow layer is I'm going to go to my adjustments. In the upper left hand corner, if we tap on this magic wand, we see a whole bunch of adjustments. One of them can be Gaussian blur, so when I tap on that, now I slide my finger or stylus to the left or the right to either make it blurrier, like, whoa, I just slid it way too fast. Let's try this again. If I slide my finger to the right, it gets blurrier, and we can see it getting blurrier, and that looks pretty good. Now, some areas are blurrier than others, and so that's what I want to do now, is I want to come in here and blur those up a little more. So I'm going to tap off the adjustment since we're done adjusting that. And what we're going to be using is our smudge tool, which is the finger in the upper right hand corner. Now I'm going to tap on that again, and I'm going to find something that is good for blending. And this just takes a little experimentation. Right now I'm on the artistic brushes and the Gensinki ink. Gensinki, maybe I should use something I can pronounce. But I'm going to start with this, and I'm just going to start going into the shadow and blurring it a little bit. And I remember some of this stuff was really blurred, and I'm going to actually turn down the intensity or the size a little bit on the left-hand side. There we go. Because some of this was more blurred than others, and it felt to me like the further out I got, the more blurred it got. So, yeah, just going to come in here and blur this out a little bit. There we go. That's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm going to really blur this part, blur out this. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect. It's just something that we're kind of playing with and we're experimenting with. That was a little too much. There we go. Blur that out. Going to blur this out. In some areas, I'm going to leave kind of more solid, and some I'm going to blur out a little bit more. There we go. Definitely going to blur that a little bit. I think the closer the shadow gets to the object, the less blurry it is. So there we go. This looks a little weird now, but I think as we get going and we add layers underneath it, it's going to look okay. So the next thing we want to do is, obviously the shadow wasn't black, so we're going to adjust the opacity of it by tapping on our layers, going down to leave shadow. I'm going to tap on the letter N, and let's just kind of look. Maybe 30% looks kind of like where we want to be. So that looks all right. That looks okay. I think we're going to settle with that. Maybe I turn it up a tiny bit. But yeah, right around there, between 30 and 40% seems about right to me. So we have our leaves in here, we have our shadows in here, and in the next section, we're going to start adding more levels to this.